Hi. This is unlikely to be the last video I make on this subject because there's a lot of angles I think to look at current events. Um, but I do feel compelled to say something. And of course, one of the great things about having this medium is that we can have outlook on things. I just got slightly distracted there. I got a message from a friend, which I'll respond to after this. But basically, yeah, identity politics is on overdrive right now. Absolutely on overdrive. And what's happening in the United States is definitely, I'm not going to say importing here because I think a lot of it was already here, definitely being exacerbated. And basically, the situation now is if you're white, you have to wholeheartedly accept the mantra of white privilege as a concept, divisive and inaccurate, in my opinion, that it is. You have to fully endorse it. If you don't, then you're just displaying your white privilege and you are a racist and you're okay with police brutality. And yeah, that's it. And if you're black or are a visible minority, you have to endorse the mantra um, of systematic racism and injustice and yeah, um, resentment, really. Because fundamentally that's also what the idea of white privilege comes down to. It's about the politics of resentment. So basically, if you have any shortcoming in life, it must be because you're black or brown. That must be the reason. That's what is so dangerous, in my opinion, about pushing this narrative that every single problem there is for minority people must be because of systematic racism. I think what Candace Owens said about the black community, and this was her words, not sort of taking account of the troublemakers in their midst is relevant. Um, I mean, when we say white racism, and there is absolutely white racists out there. There was footage, for example, of this guy in a taxi in, I believe it was in Birmingham, and he was mouthing off to the Pakistani taxi driver, just completely ignorant guy. Um, if you look at the sort of responses to that, many, if not most, of the critics will actually be white. So I don't think there is a denial within the white community, and I'm very reluctant to use that term um, because I'm reluctant actually to use the term community for any group, but I'm doing it for the sake of simplicity here. You know, there will be very few white people condoning that. They'll say, "Oh yeah, he's a loudmouthed, ignorant yob. He's a racist." The majority of the time, when white racism is shown, white people condemn it. Yet, generalizing all white people with this mantra of white privilege seems to be acceptable. And some of those who push it hardest is white liberals, because they're kind of virtue signaling in a very extreme way, but um, I don't know why they do it. If it's a matter of it's a sincere belief, they do believe that they're privileged. If it's that they've kind of accepted this narrative that because there's been a history of institutional white racism, then all white people are beneficiaries of that today. I don't believe that's true. I believe that the divisions in society are more economic than racial. Um, I mean, there's discrepancies, for example, between the north and the south of England, which is going to impact a black person in the north of England in as well as a white person in the north of England versus a black person in the south of England. I think there's a lot of economic disparities that I'm not going to say they've got nothing to do with race, but the main issue is also regional, particularly in this country. Um, but I just don't like what I'm seeing here because what we're seeing is forced identity politics. And let's not forget, all of this was triggered over the death of one black man in Minneapolis, which the four officers are now facing trial. Um, and I know there's issues that predated that. I'm not suggesting that all the anger is about George Floyd, but it was the catalyst. Um, and I just think it's really sad that this is happening, that people are being forced into these positions. So if you're white and you don't endorse the mantra, then you're going to be vilified no matter what you say or do. You can condemn police brutality, you can condemn white racists, but you will still be lumped in the same category if you don't endorse the narrative that Black Lives Matter, for example, is putting out. Um, now they've got defensively say, oh, we're not just saying only Black Lives Matter. We're not. And I saw this rationale actually for the fact that they don't cover black on black crime as being that they've always been justice. The focus has been about justice as opposed to deaths. But the whole point is the name of the group, the name of the movement is Black Lives Matter, not justice for black people or um, justice for black people now or something like that. The focus has always been about lives. That's why it seemed valid to me to raise the issue of black people who die in different circumstances, many of them from black on black crime. It's just a fact. I don't see why it's contentious to raise that. And I don't see why that shouldn't be discussed. It's almost like if you raise that, then you're trying to downplay police brutality. I think that's what they believe. By they, I'm talking about people who endorse not just Black Lives Matter, but the current push of identity politics. You know, the problem with this is it tribalizes people because then it puts a lot of white people on the defensive because they're thinking, they hear this narrative of white privilege, and they think, wait a second, that's not my life. You know, I'm not privileged. I'm struggling with bills, or worse, I might not have a roof over my head. Depends on the individual. But what that will do is push people into a corner and make them feel resentful at the smear. And I contend it is the only racial generalization that seems to be acceptable. If you were to say all black people are this, or all Asian people are that, or all Hispanic people are the other, it would be seen as a racist generalization. Yet it seemed to be okay to talk in terms of the white people. Now, I do have a problem with it because privilege absolutely denotes perks. It denotes getting something unduly. In fact, I'll read out the exact definition of privilege. This is the exact dictionary definition of privilege. Just bear with me a second. Privilege, noun, a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular group of people. Right, advantage, or immunity. So the insinuation there is if you commit a crime and you're white, you'll get away with it. Um, or you will, get a more lenient sentence, or you'll be immune. Um, this may be true in institutional aspects of the United States history. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, right up to the 60s, for example, black people obviously didn't have equal voting rights. And I still would say the situation in the United States is far from ideal. I think it's better in the UK. I don't think it's perfect, but it's still presents a false narrative. If I commit a crime, a judge isn't going to say, okay, well, this is a white defendant, so I better give him a more lenient sentence. And I can't use as a defense, oh, well, Your Honor, I'm white, so please don't punish me. It would be nonsensical. It wouldn't even be conceived. That's just an example. There's many other examples. If I go into a shop, could I push in front of some black or Asian people and say, oh, well, I'm white, give me preference? And those who push the term insist that there's X, Y, and Z that black and brown people suffer that white people don't. They might, for example, point to the current situation with COVID-19. We've surpassed 40,000 deaths in this country, and then might say there is more black and brown lives being lost. I think it's valid to raise that issue, and I think it's valid to discuss the issues around that. But one thing you could be absolutely sure of, it won't be because the virus is racist, and it won't be because dedicated NHS personnel are somehow discriminating against black and brown people. I think there'll be probably different reasons involved in that. It may be down to locations because we know, for example, there's been a higher death toll in urban areas. Um, visible minority people tend to live more in urban areas than in rural areas. That may be a factor. There may be other issues involved. Um, but I detest identity politics, to be quite honest. I absolutely detest, particularly racial identity politics. And I'm not talking about, like, let's say someone has their heritage in Nigeria and they're proud of their Nigerian roots. That's fine. I've no issue with that. And I've no issue with anyone actually being proud of their roots. So someone who's Irish or French or Chinese, whatever. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with that. You know, in the modern world, people move around. People often have mixed blood. People often intermarry. There's a lot of nuances to this, and then you get generational things. People who are third generation British Indian or British Chinese will have very mixed feelings on their heritage. You know, very often they will say they feel not Western side, but they also feel some connection to their Eastern side as well. When I say I detest identity politics, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is when it is used to polarize and to divide. I think in every racial group you could probably find some trends or some things that perhaps are more of a problem than they are in other racial groups. So, for example, in London, there is a specific problem with young black men killing each other with knives. It's irrefutable. But you will find in certain parts of the north of England and Scotland and Northern Ireland, there's problems with young white men perhaps being involved in drugs or other such problems. But those are just loose examples. I could give many examples. You might find that particular racial groups disproportionately are represented than other racial groups. But does that necessarily mean racism? No, I don't think it does. I think there might be a lot of things that are actually being overlooked. What I have a problem with is reducing everything to racism. It's not to say that racism doesn't exist. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you cannot just dismiss absolutely every problem in society as being about racism. Um, and that's why this identity politics that we are seeing from these protests and this, I'm trying to think of a collective name for what's going on. It's difficult because there is violence, there is looting, there is protests, there is identity politics, there's all these things going on at once. It's difficult to kind of have a collective name for the events, but that's what I'm saying. And sometimes, to be honest, it makes me very angry because I don't think it helps anyone. I think it doesn't help black and brown people because it makes them feel resentful. Not all of them, because many of them don't endorse this mentality. You can't, it's not something that is shared by all people, but The truth is, there will be black and brown people that fully endorse the term, not help when white liberals also promote the term. And then they'll say, well, every time I have an exchange with a white person, they're privileged. So what the hell do they understand about racism? What the hell do they understand about struggles in life? They're privileged. They have everything given to them. They don't have any struggles. Never mind the fact I don't know their individual circumstances, but hey, they're white. So let's just pretend that let's just assume that we know everything about them. They're white, therefore they're privileged. Therefore they need to shut up. That's the mentality that is going to be. So these white liberals that push it, they think that they're being open-minded and virtuous. I think they're just fueling the flames. I really, really do. Because not only are they sending out that narrative to minority people, but they're also, to put it bluntly, angering, pissing off those white people who know it isn't their station in life. Anyway, I'll leave it here for now, but I just feel sad about what's happening because if you think outside the box, then people are just going to jump to conclusions, and I guess we just have to have tough skin and accept that's going to happen. Um, Maybe we've got to a point where if you're smeared as a racist, it could certainly be destructive in terms of if your job is on the line or your reputation. But people who throw that term around are going to do it anyway. They're not interested in deeper thought. They're not interested in actually having an intelligent adult discussion about these things. They just want to smear people. That's all they're interested in. They're going to do that anyway. It's not, unfortunately, it's difficult to change that mentality. Um, there you have it.